maintenance, doesn't require a whole lot of conversion and whatnot. Self-twi version 7.0.
Is that really what he says in that?
I don't know. That's it.
Okay, now
maybe phonetically.
Now I have to. Now I have to know the actual lyrics to that. Let me not. I have so many fucking tabs open right now to keep track of all that I would like to talk about, musically speaking.
Oh no, okay. He doesn't say. He says software version 7.0, but it's the way he says it that's really fucking weird.
You've seen
the
the
version 7.0.
You've seen the YouTube caption of the interview with him, where they get his name wrong, and instead of hi, I'm Serge Tankian, it's hi, I'm Sarah Stanky. And I will forever call Serge Tankian Sarah Stanky now.
Sarah Stanky.
All right, so welcome to the Stusic podcast, and here with my favorite pod guest is Joel Smith. You're the person.
You say that's all your podcasts, don't you?
Yes, but also you're the person I've podcasted with the most over the years.
Hell yeah.
So we have that chemistry.
Right.
So what I wanted to have you on today to talk about, it's been, I don't know on your end, but I know on my end, there's been a ton of music released.
Mm-hmm.
Like so much so that I went to the local record store, Vinyl Frontier in Carrollton, Georgia, which, by the way, quick plug for this, Brandon Quigg, Corporal Quigg on Bandcamp. He's also in Ossifer. That's the correct saying. It recorded a bunch of live acts that happened at Vinyl Frontier over 2024 and is selling physical copies only of 15 tracks of local artist performances from the Vinyl Frontier to raise music for Carroll County music programs.
I had no idea about this. Otherwise, I'd have been pimping it on my socials this whole time. That is really cool.
Yes, I went...
What bands has he done so far?
So there's 15 acts on it. I cannot quite remember. I know the ones that stood out to me. It's how I told you about Gretzky de Sumo.
Yeah.
He did
the rapper.
Yes, he did a fantastic job. Quigg's band Ossifer, they killed it. They're like a new wave sort of talking headsy type synth bass thing. They have two different synth players.
Neat.
And Devin Scott Stroud, his performance on that is just fucking haunting. It's like one of those that just makes you want to be quiet. And then once the performance is over, just cry for like 20 minutes. It's really good. If anything, if you live in the area, go buy that for those three alone. But
that's a great plug, man.
Yeah, no, I bought it. It was worth it. He also shame on me for not remembering the name of these guys, but let me pull them up really quick. There is also a group of very young kids from Carrollton who have started a punk band. Well, not started. They've had it for a while. The drummer is still in Carrollton High School.
I'm wondering if I know any of these people. Like I've been around the music scene quite a bit, at least with cover artists. Not a whole lot with original music, but I'm sure I've crossed paths. If you can find a personnel list, or is this online anywhere to be able to? I mean, I know that you said it's physical copies only, but does he have a track listing anywhere?
He does have a track listing. Yes, he does. So let me pull that up real quick. Okay, so we have. I'm gonna butcher this, but that's okay. Tzayla, Tzayla, performing "I Love You" in the beginning. Then we have Gretzky de Sumo and Day Tripper with InfoWars. We have Subliminal with Invitation to the Trance. We have Iramu with Chimes. We have Synthetica with Ex Secret Agent. Sweet Meteor of Death with I Am Demon, which, if they're the band I'm thinking of, their intro to their song, what the singer says before they go into it, is absolutely perfect. I won't give it away on the podcast because people need to go buy this, but
okay.
Yeah, that was a great moment, great performance, but what he says right before is perfect. We have Fuzzy Wuzzy with Cold Feet. We have Young Delana with Cha-Ching. We have Really Purple with Player One. Bryant Perez with Bow Down. Rocksploitation with Sore Loser. Lake Collins with Motel. Devin Scott Stroud with Daisy. Ossifer with Something in Your House. And Tyler Hewitt with The Outlaw Marty Parsons.
Man, those are all apart from Ossifer, who I've only heard of because of you and Brandon. Those are all new to me. At least I don't know the band names. I might know some of the personnel, but yeah, those are some cool sounded band names. And are they all different genres, or is it all in the rock genre?
Yes, there is a ton of sort of experimental stuff on here, which made me really happy to see that locally there's not just your typical sort of rock, metal, blah, blah, blah type scene. You know, it's that there's some people doing some stuff that I would comfortably, in the best way possible, call weird. And the fact that the Vinyl Frontier gave them a place to play that stuff, recorded it, and released it is fucking fantastic to me. So I love everything about that project.
That's super dope. Yeah. Kudos to Brandon for doing that.
But while I was there picking up my copy the other day, we started talking about music. And so much has come out that has just, I'd forgotten about. He asked me what my top pick of the year was, and I named one, and then he named another, and then they have a list of their own of all the employees, their top 10 of the year.
Okay.
And I was reading that, and, you know, things were coming back to memory as I'm looking at that, and just, it's been a very dense year. However, so a couple of things I wanted to talk about on this podcast that's sort of the primary focus. It's not just your run-of-the-mill, here's our top 10 of 2024.
Right.
First off, how often do you go back and re-listen to previous year's top 10s from anybody, like any of the people whose opinions that you respect? Do you really go back and listen to those after January or February of the next year? I have never done that. So it seems like just a kind of thing to bump up views or whatever for that little time period, which is fine. But I think it's an interesting thing to look at. Things from the previous year that you're still listening to, because I know sometimes it's like new shiny music and then you listen to it a lot for maybe a month and then you never revisit it for like several years. So I'm kind of trying to focus more on what we've been listening to throughout the year, regardless of when it was released.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of 2023. What has held up? What has sort of stood that year time?
Yeah, I had a completely different result when going through the music to pick out for this, and I really only have my like Spotify Wrapped to go off of, and I realized that there has been very little in the way, at least for me, in new music that has come out that has really stuck with me, and where I can. I mean, there's a couple of songs here and there, and I'm gonna go through the list. It's a couple of the ones that stick out, but I had I had a very interesting couple of years in my life. Most of which you're aware of, and I think I've kind of I don't know if plateaued's the right word, but I've gotten to a point where I'm listening to a lot of the same stuff just out of comfortability, familiarity, putting it on stuff that I've listened to every year. And when we were talking about doing this earlier, I kind of compared it in the sense of like TV shows, where yes, I'll check out the occasional TV show, but once the season's over, I'm not going to go back and watch it again until maybe the next season comes out. But for the most part, when I'm wanting to put something on, I'm putting on something that's just like comforting background. I may not even sit and pay attention and watch it. And, most of my music listening is relegated to driving to and from work or to and from gigs. I find there's very few occasions where I'm like putting on music to listen to when I get home. I don't know if that's just the state I'm in lately or what it is, but actually that just reminded me that I need to add something to the list for us to talk about. But I don't know. Most of the stuff that because I had to go back. I had to go to my Spotify Wrapped from 2023 and my Spotify Wrapped from 2024 to kind of look and compare. And there's a lot of similarity. And I notice kind of what I do sometimes. And you're one of the few people who sends me stuff to where I'll get latched onto it for a little while, like the Opeth album when it came out. That I listened to for a little while, and then I went back to, what I normally do is just putting on my Spotify Wrapped from the previous year and shuffling it, and then just going through, and a bunch of those songs get filtered out into the Spotify Wrapped for the next year because I've just listened to that playlist so many times. Or I'll put on like lo-fi beats when the kids are in the car or I have something to do, and so that makes its way, a bunch of Star Wars and Zelda lo-fi beats that I listen to. But, those count as music. But one of the lo-fi artists was one of my top artists this year just because I have a playlist I go to. And I find myself listening to playlists more than I'd say maybe 50-50. I'd say 50% albums that I'll listen to from start to finish. And then the rest of the time it's a playlist. And then even lately, I've been kind of on a YouTube kick. I don't know. We've talked about this before in the past, but there will be sometimes where I can't focus my brain. I can't get into that emotional connected state with music like I do. It's a dance almost, or almost like intercourse. If I could put it in any kind of way, like having that relationship with the music where it's like hitting you intimately and you're feeling it and you're enjoying it. Sometimes it's hard for me to get in that state, so I'll put on just YouTube so I can have like guided thought or podcasts or whatever. And then other times I'll be so inside my head or so inside of my soundtrack mind that I get into where it's like whatever I'm experiencing or going through needs to have some music to really be able to cathartically experience it. Then I'm in these stages of, okay, I'm listening to this album over and over and over again. And I'll get to what that one is or those couple of ones are, but music in general over the past year, and I kind of have to connect the past 2 years together because the past 2 years have been such a radically different part of my life than many, many years prior. And so I think that it takes a really special album, and I do have a couple of those listed, or a really special song to really hook me and take me out of that comfort eating, which is, it's just like musically comfort eating and listening to the stuff that I know that's familiar, that is not gonna shake things up too much for me. I don't know. I did after the whole Tenacious D thing happened with with the stuff where the band kind of broke up and stuff. I went through a week where I was listening to Rage Against the Machine, and I was really angry, and I was listening to their greatest hits. Uh, it's like that stuck with me for a little while, and then I got it out of my system and went back to listening to the Midnight. But without ranting too much, that's kind of my music thesis of the past year or so.
So I do have an interesting question about that. Well, two questions. Do you think your
Sure.
profession has changed the way that you listen to music now?
No. No, I still I and it never did like being an event DJ for the past 6-7 years. None of the music that I listen to is the music that I play at events that I go to or that I'm performing at. Like I'm always playing popular songs that I know will get people out on the dance floor, and ones that I know that the white girls are gonna love to dance to at the end of the night. It's basic stuff. So I've always kind of compartmentalized my musical taste. Like at the end of the night, after a long, loud night of people dancing to Apple Bottom Jeans and Usher and Lil Jon, I'll put on Casualties of Cool and roll the windows down and just listen to that at a medium volume on the way home. Just kind of zen in that. It's quite the dichotomy is not the word I want to use, but stark contrast. That's the word. Quite a contrast between what I play and what I listen to. And so starting at Guitar Center, I'm sick of hearing Layla every goddamn day. Let me say that first off. It plays at 11:15 every single morning. But at least they stopped playing Plush at 4:45 every evening. Because I do like that song and I don't want to hate it. But no, I wouldn't say that it's affected me. It's made me, working at Guitar Center has made me want to be far more focused in creating music than consuming music. And being a cover artist for so many years, and so much of the performance that I do is just singing other people's stuff or playing other people's stuff, I feel very blue ballsed with my own creative output and like putting my own emotions and experiences and the feelings I have inside of my mind, being able to put those out there. And so I feel maybe that's also another factor in keeping me from really diving in with new music, because so much of the time when I find something I enjoy, it often leads to envy. And that envy is oh, I'm not going to be good enough to play something like this, or I it should be inspiring to me, but sometimes I end up leaning far more towards the cynical side of things, and I want, I wish I was as good as John Petrucci is, or Mark Tremonti, or any of those. And so in my mind it's like, well, you're not going to get that good, so don't even bother trying to make music. But because you're not making music, don't even bother trying to enjoy new music. I've kind of, I kind of set myself up into traps sometimes, emotionally speaking.
There is a,
but no, I don't think, yeah.
There is a quote that in trying to in trying to imitate the people that you look up to and failing, you then create your own sound.
I like that.
So who knows? Maybe if
I
you
can
take that bar and raise it to, that level, shoot for it and fall short, that's where you'll sort of find your sound.
And I think I kind of, if I can ever get these songs that I've written out, that I have demoed, I have, my song that's attempting to be a Coheed song. I'm sure it's nowhere near as good as a Coheed song, but it's definitely one of the best things I've ever written. One of the most complex things I've ever put together and actually demoed out, of all of the very few things I have done that with. I have, I can count on both hands and toes how many songs I've written and demos. Probably just both hands, actually. I don't even need toes. If I could get to a place where I'm more free to have a creative output, I think I would get to the point where I could just demo shit constantly and just, put a riff, put some stuff on top of it, and boom, put it out there until I'm ready to package it and make it into a real song. But yeah, my tastes in music, I think they've stayed mainly the same. I'm still, in my prog bubble and in enjoying the synthwave type stuff, when I'm feeling extra moody and on a rain dripped neon evening, need to put something on like that. I have found myself leaning, and maybe this is just a need for laughter, but there's a lot more comedic type stuff that I've been listening to lately that I've been enjoying as well. So some of that.
So, where would you like to? I guess the best place to start would be January. Now, because I'm a pretentious dick and I use Tidal instead of Spotify. Yeah. Does Spotify let you segregate it by the month, or is it just the year?
No, it just shows me a playlist of the most listened to stuff throughout the year.
Okay, so gotcha.
Top songs and I mean I can just jump around. If you want to do it month by month, that's fine. I'll tell you this, I did not start because I quit vaping and smoking weed in October of 2023, and it wasn't until February of 2024 that I started back vaping again. And at that point, because when I cut all that substance out of my system, my attention span and my ability to enjoy any of the things that I enjoyed while I was doing that stuff completely evaporated. So in January of 2024, I don't even think I was listening to music in 2024 in January.
Gotcha.
I don't think it was until February that I even started getting back into feeling like, oh, I can put some music on now and not feel empty inside.
That's actually,
let's not make it too depressing, but I was not, my season, it was like, I was kind of purging everything.
Well, no, I kind of went through something similar because I got divorced in November, and so really looking at my January, it's pretty dry looking at my sort of January listening habits. It's mostly the same sort of things that I've been listening to since, I found music, like Ocean Machine by Devin Townsend, Infinity. Oddly, there's some Anna von Hauswolf, she's a very sort of witchy female singer from Norway or one of the, Netherlands region countries.
Yeah.
And she very much, to me, achieves what Stevie Nicks wanted to achieve instead of just being like, the cocaine witch. It's very droney. It's very moody. It's really cool. It's a unique little thing. So I would have to give a shout out to that. From January, even though that album, the Live at Montreux, came out in 2022. So
okay.
My January was chock full of old stuff. Like, nothing new to report there. I know at the beginning of the year, because my listening habits shift with the seasons.
Okay, yeah, me too.
And cold weather, I get really into the sort of black metal type thing. So like black metal, the hardcore Angel Dust era, Faith No More, sort of manic type, really dark stuff I get really into. So at the beginning of the year, Isan from Emperor.
Oh, yeah, I remember you talking about Isan.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I will give it away that my top song of 2024 was Arcana Empyre off of
Okay.
one of his last albums. They all have like strange Nordic names. But
Isan, or as I like to call him, Fluffy Bunny Pants, Emperor of all Unicorns.
which, did you listen to the Devin Townsend podcast with him on it?
I don't think I did.
Okay,
no.
he was actually on it. And yeah, he's a very soft-spoken, gentle, awesome guy. But I want to say it's, I'm not going to attempt to pronounce this with my Americanized pronunciation, but it's AMR is the name of the album, and that came out in 2018. So
Okay.
my top listened to song of 2024 was a song from 2018.
Nice.
And what about you? Where do you want to start?
So let me go to my notes here and see. Well, my top song from the year. What is number one? It's a cover. My number one song from 2024 was "Rainbow in the Dark" by Corey Taylor and Jason Christopher, along with Roy Mayorga, Christian Martucci, and Satchel. I don't know who Satchel is, but this is from a Ronnie James Dio tribute album that came out after he died, called Ronnie James Dio, This Is Your Life. And I don't know, I found this album randomly because Tenacious D did a cover of The Last in Line, and it's really well done. And so this album has Corey Taylor doing Rainbow in the Dark. It's got The Mob Rules by Adrenaline Mob on there, Neon Nights by Anthrax. It's got Hailstorm, Motorhead, Scorpions. It's got the Killswitch Engage Holy Diver on it. And just a side note, now that we're talking about this album, there's one thing that I really don't like about this album, and that is it does not include Stargazer by Dream Theater on there. From the Black Clouds and Silver Linings bonus disc, from disc 2.
Yes. Which that's Rainbow.
And
that's
I love
old Dio. That's Rainbow. That was like 1978.
Well, what it has in place of that is a Metallica medley that includes A Light in the Black, Tarot Woman, Stargazer, and Kill the King. And so it's all of these songs, and Metallica just does like a medley and goes through different parts of the songs together. And I was showing Aaron this the other day because I was explaining to him my disappointment that version's not on there, because I love that. I think I like that bonus disc on Black Clouds more than I like Black Clouds itself.
Agreed.
It's a fantastic. Take Your Fingers from My Hair has my favorite guitar solo Petrucci has ever done on it. And he didn't even write it. Well, I mean, he wrote his version, but yeah, you listen to the Metallica version of Stargazer and then compare it to Dream Theater, and it's like night and day. It's like sad and pitiful on the Metallica version. It's just it reminds me of that Ziltoid Radio where he's dueling with AC/DC, and he's like, "My turn," and he's doing all these weird, phrases and his space metal thing, and then it goes back to the guitar Angus's, and he's like, it just sounds very dinky in comparison, and that's I didn't like it. But yeah, Rainbow in the Dark was my number one. My number one.
Why does Angus Young's guitar playing sound like a really insulting, like American doing a Chinese accent?
I didn't mean for it to sound that way, but it's high pitched, and it's squeaky blues stuff. And when put into comparison, I guess it's Devin supposed to be playing Ziltoid, but Ziltoid doing his, I am from outer space.
Yeah, that sounds like Larry the Cable Guy reading a Chinese food menu.
Get her done, I tell you what. My next song next to Rainbow in the Dark, which I think I listened to just as much as Empty Handed by Bill Murray. The American Motorsports is on my list of top albums that have kind of stayed with me throughout the year. I think that came out in 2024. That came out this year.
The very beginning. That was one of the ones, that and Isan's self-titled album, which if I had to rate, it was okay. It was not his best work. It was very symphonic, and it has moments, but like The Taste of Ambrosia, Blood Trails to Love, those are two that stand out, and the Promethean Spark are mentions from the Isan album. But for the most part, it was just okay. I listened to it for about a week, and then it kind of fell by the wayside. But Bill Murray, a couple of things about that. It came out... There's no way this came out in October.
Of this year?
Yeah, no, it came out at the very beginning, like January.
Oh, no. No, American Motorsports 400cc or 40cc edition or whatever.
Okay, gotcha.
The expanded edition came out in October of this year. So the original version released June 28th.
Wow, that late? I don't know why that felt like an early release, but I had no idea that
he had been releasing singles from it for a while too.
That's why
he had been because Better Hell came out for a long time before that. Blindsided, the original version of Drunk Enough before he redid it.
Which, by the way,
all gas.
You said something about Bill Murray and this era of Bill Murray specifically that I thought was the perfect summary. Do you remember what you said? What Bill Murray is?
Is it like it's Taylor Swift for metalheads?
No, your exact words that stick out to me was it's Taylor Swift for people with neck beards. And that is such a perfect summary. Which, look, I'm not knocking Taylor Swift. I'm not knocking people with neck beards. They're both fine.
No, but yeah, it very much is that. Like the songwriting, the subject matter, the way that it's very poppy focused with the hooks that get you, and yeah, I don't know. So much. Maybe it's because at the time that I discovered and fell in love with Bill Murray, I was also having a very weird relationship with Taylor Swift's music. Which we don't have to get into on this podcast because that could probably be a podcast all on its own. But yeah, there were so many similarities that I found between their music and their songwriting, and I just happened to be discovering them both at the same time. And so they are kind of inextricably linked in my mind to each other. And yeah, American Motorsports is transcendent from all of his work that he's done. While we're on Bill Murray, he's one of the ones I would count in that comedic category of artists that I've kind of been into that have a, because before American Motorsports, a lot of his songs featured memes and funny quotes from things and sound effects from movies. Like he had the Taco Bell in one of them. He has clips from Portal in it, and his album 400 Pound Back Squat, which is my favorite album of his, which is more of an EP. Before American Motorsports, all of his albums were like 5 or 6 songs. They're very short, and then this was like his first really full length album. But yeah, so many of those songs I still go back to, and that one has the song "A Cowboy's Heavy Load," which was the first song I discovered by him, thanks to Spotify's algorithm just throwing it randomly at the end of something I was listening to. And then 2023, end of 2022, 2023 is really when I went down the huge Bill Murray rabbit hole, and that was most of what he was my number one artist that year. I had a playlist that was like every one of his songs that I liked. His older stuff was a lot moodier and quieter and much more sincere and kind of sad. But then around the time of Eggy Pocket, that's when he started adding in the more metal elements and the the funny, weird stuff that having like I mean, he still has it in the new album in American Motorsports. He has Kevin James, doing the NASCAR thing in Empty Handed. Gentlemen, start your engines. But yeah, Bill Murray's great.
A little.
Can't wait to see what he's coming out with next.
A little backstory on him that, because I knew this was an album we were going to focus on at some point. And I do have thoughts on it. But before I get into that, I had no idea that he was the guitarist and clean vocalist for Attack Attack.
Yeah.
And if you go to his Wikipedia, his guest appearances and discography is really fucking immense.
Mm-hmm.
And I had no clue, but that's a little bit of a backstory on Johnny Frank, who is Bill Murray.
Yep. He falls into one of those categories similar to Dev in that he is kind of a person with he's collaborative. He definitely collaborates with wonderful musicians, but he definitely has like a singular vision for his music, and his personality is almost as equally as enjoyable as his music is. And so he's the kind, much like Dev, with really dedicated fans who like love the stuff he puts out, enjoys what he makes and interacts with it, very active on social media, and just a fun music personality. But at the same time, also makes some really serious and heartfelt music, so you feel that kind of like heart connection with the artist, like a lot of people do with Dev. But yeah, that's a lot of the artists that I find I like share in that similar quality, where it's it's not just a connection to the music, but a connection to the artist as well.
His ability to write a pop tune is phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's
and to make it as heavy as it is and not be like it's heavy in a way where you could show your mom and she wouldn't be like, "Oh, that's too harsh." Like, it's, he's using detuned 7 and 8 string guitars for really heavy, or it's at least produced to sound that way, but it still comes across as like accessible, even though it's brutally crushing heavy.
I thought it was a great album. I couldn't really get into his older stuff so much, for whatever reason, but American Motorsports was fucking brilliant. However, my problem is most of the album ended up being singles for the better part of a year before the album came out. So much so that agreed. I thought the album was out at the beginning of the year. Really, I think we did the math and I think 2 songs were the only songs that weren't previously released when the album came out.
It was about half. So, let me see. Miss Me, Spinning You Around, Straight Through You, Talking to Your Ghost, and Drunk Enough were not. So, yeah, half of them. And then when he released the extra, like, 400cc edition or whatever, that also had 2 more unreleased songs on it. And then also included 2 other songs that were released prior to this, Bow to Cashew and Livin', Laughin', Lovin', that were not released on the album either. Like, a lot of people were like, why didn't you include that? And a part of it was because he had already released it so long ago and wanted to leave a good ratio of new to stuff you've already heard. But yeah, because this is the first time he's done this type of album, and it's on Columbia Records too, which is one of the first major labels he's put out music through. A lot of the other stuff was all independently released, and he's following that model that a lot of modern artists are doing, where you're just drip feeding them stuff all the time instead of a big release and then you hear nothing from them for a year or 2, and then it's another rev up marketing campaign to put your stuff out there. He's always got something to keep his audience engaged. But that may have backfired a little bit with this album, with releasing so much stuff while getting the album ready to
Right,
go.
especially because I mean the biggest single off the album was probably Better Hell, and that is the first song on the album. And I remember when we started podcasting back in 2019, and Dream Theater had just released
Distance
Over Time. And the first couple of songs were singles, and that's when I first really started to notice that it bugs the fuck out of me when a band releases an album and the first like 2 or 3 songs are singles, because when you go to put that album on for the first time, it's the stuff that you've probably binge listened to already. And at that point, it's I feel kind of burned out by the time the album is released, and especially with Better Hell, because that was the song that really got me into Bill Murray. Mm-hmm. And opening the album with that, just kind of that and Empty Handed, it didn't set well with me, and it never does. It's nothing against him, and this is the first I'm hearing that he's on Columbia Records now. Probably has something to do with that, but either way, it's just it's not something that I like. But the album itself is fucking great.
Yeah. No, it is a every track on there, in my opinion, is its own kind of banger. And I mean, it's definitely the highest listened album that he's got now. Looking at his stats on Spotify, I mean, 4 out of the top 5 songs that he has are from the original release, and then the number 2 top song he has is from the bonus release. Only 1 song on his top 10 is prior to this last album. But yeah, great artist. Definitely highly recommend American Motorsports and anything by Bill Murray. If you if you have not checked him out, if you're listening and you're like, I don't know who this guy is, go listen to it. It's really good. And you maybe another reason why you're not so hot on his other stuff is because this album in particular really sticks to the what do they call it? He calls it y'alternative. The bro country metal mashup type stuff, where he would have like 1 song like this on each album prior to this. There would always be 1 song on one of his EPs that had the country solo on top of the metal part, and that was, and then people were like, oh, I really love that. And then finally he released a whole album that was, musically similar. Each song really played into that country pop, kind of early Taylor Swift type sound. And yeah, so maybe in some way you resonate more with the country aspect of it than the more avant-garde, which is really what it was beforehand. It was, it was not, I wouldn't even call it hardcore necessarily, but it was kind of post-rock avant-garde meets heavy production and electronica,
Well, for me, I think a lot of it stems from, and this year has taught me one thing. What ended up standing out to me a lot this year are things that I never would have sought out previously. For the most part, minus like a couple of like key artist releases that were already in my repertoire of listening habits. But I am starting to develop a dislike for the really polished production style. Ooh. And his stuff, it's no judgment when I say this, because everybody on earth does it, but the auto-tune, the editing of the guitar parts, the cutting of all the noise, it's starting to bother me more than it used to. And his stuff comes across a little too polished.
I love Will Carlson, though. He's the guy who produces all of his stuff. And, like, the stuff that I love of his the most is the stuff that Will produced, because he used to produce his own stuff on his early stuff, and then he met up with Will, and he's been his producer ever since. He did a Nail the Mix recently that I watched, and there was no way I was going to be able to keep up with it, but I at least signed up for a free trial to follow his mixing methods. But yeah, I can understand where you're coming from on not liking it too polished. I mean, that's one of our big differences in music is, you like live stuff a whole lot more than I do. And I think that there's a lot of that raw honesty that you enjoy about it that, maybe I like my music a little more sterile, as my dad would call it, studio music, they're a studio band. You can't recreate that live, that sound, which is very true. They do not sound the same live as they do on the album. Like, you go see them live, it's a much more raw experience. There's way more saxophone on it because they have a sax player who's there the whole time for each song. So there's parts that aren't normally saxophone on the album that are just added on because she's there. Yeah, if you get a chance to see them live, I'd love to know your thoughts on it as far as the older stuff goes, if you might even enjoy it more in a live setting.
I've seen the clips in his banter that he posts on social media, and I know that his banter is fucking great.
They do Beyblade matches at his concerts and stuff. Right on stage.
But the first portion of my year was essentially listening to things from 2023. Speaking of live albums, The Midnight dropped Red, White, and Bruised the year before.
Yeah.
Which is just, I love that live album. It's so good. Especially the female vocals on the live versions from that album are perfect.
Yep. Yeah, one of my top songs from this year and last year was The Heroes live version. I listened to that version more than I listened to the album version.
I wish she would sing that entire song.
The female vocalist on it.
Because
you think so?
when she comes in, it is fucking great. Like, I want to fuck her voice.
Yeah, agreed. Sure.
But things like that from last year, one that stood out to me from last year was, and it's most likely circumstantial and related to my sort of mental state and what was going on within my life, but In Times New Roman, the last Queens of the Stone Age album, which in large part deals with Josh Homme going through divorce. He went through divorce. He had cancer. A lot of things happened in his life, and it was the first music they'd put out in a while, and for a long time he didn't even pick up an instrument. The rest of the band had to like twist his arm into sort of, getting back into writing. And that album stood out to me a lot. More stoner rock metal type things, like Baroness released Stone last year, and I thought that album was brilliant through and through, kind of like a Mastodon-y sounding type thing.
Yeah. Baroness is very much in that same vein as Mastodon in my mind.
I know that they have Gina Gleason playing for them now, and she is fucking awesome. She was the live guitarist for Cirque du Soleil.
Oh, neat.
Yeah,
okay.
And her solo and Last Word off Stone has no right to be as good as it is for that style of music. Normally, you think of kind of more simplified things, but she just fucking loses her mind, and I love it. She was also, there is, this kind of segues into my other 2023 mention that's kind of in the same style. She was on a Danzig cover that 2 Minutes to Late Night did.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I love that guy.
So those guys are in Mutoid Man. And they're such a fun fucking band. They're kind of like a stoner rocky type thing. Like a thrash stoner rock. And their last album was phenomenal from 2023. I wake up with like parts of that stuck in my head at random, like Call of the Void, Siren songs, Broken Glass Ceiling. It's that was a really good album that kind of bled into my early 2024. And honestly, I became really sort of disenchanted with the state of metal and sort of heavy music and rock in general up until the last part of this year, which I'll talk about a little later. But Childish Gambino, I think both Ada Vista and Bando Stone came out this year. Yep. And Ada Vista, we know, is a rework of 320 2020, is it?
Something like that. Yeah. It was at 328 or something.
Right, but that, I mean, had really great moments, but again, it didn't feel fully new. Like, I think you described it as the director's cut.
Yeah, it is. I actually find it has far more re-listenability in its current version than the original. And I went back and listened to the original after, because I that is one of the albums that's on my the whole album is on my 2024 top 100 songs, because I listened to that album over and over and over again from start to finish. I mean, the violence, Final Church, so many songs on there just have infinitely re-listenable parts in it, and then it also is just it it goes gangster for a little bit, and you're just like, all right, like the rap features on Littlefoot, Bigfoot, and Goldmouth, Silo Bay, which the Silo Bay and is probably my favorite song on there. That was the one that stuck with me the most from the original iteration, and I mean that one remains pretty much completely unchanged from the original. And yeah, that whole album, I listened to Bando. Unfortunately, by the time Bando came out, I was in a completely different place, both mentally and musically. I was on the Wolves of Glendale train at that time, and just completely over obsessing about that album, which I'll get into that one later. But yeah, Ada Vista is definitely on my top albums, but it is one of those that I went hard on for a long time and then haven't really gone back to it. The only times I've re-listened to any of the songs from it recently were when I was just shuffling my top 100 of the year playlist. But at the time that it came out, that was all I was listening to. That was all I was playing. And, you know, I regret that we never got a chance to do a full track-by-track review of that one, because it was definitely hot stuff when it came out, and I still need to go back and give Bando another couple of re-listens when I'm in another rap mood. You know, I unfortunately Lil Dicky's new album didn't stick with me as well as I hoped it would.
I didn't even check it out.
So
I gotta be honest.
It's good. It's good. It's just, you know, I heard most of the songs through the show. So, you know, I had already heard them at that point, and they weren't even, you know, they were more like made for TV songs than they were made for an album song. That makes sense. There was a layer of irony over it that the song didn't need to have. It was just because it was in a TV show, you could be even crazier with it, with a visual element to it. And so the lyrical quality and stuff, it didn't hit me as much as like Professional Rapper did. But yeah, Peanut, you know, is the name of that one. It was all right. It was okay. It was. There were only 2 albums that I can remember in the last year that I laid down. Actually, 3 albums. There were 3 albums in which I laid down in my bed with all of the lights off, with headphones on, and listened to the whole album from start to finish with my eyes closed, just like experiencing the music. That Lil Dicky album, Ada Vista, and Power Nerd. Those are the only ones that I was like, okay, I'm going to devote all of my attention, because I know I'm not going to be able to get a full listen in between drives to work, or, you know, I don't want to split it up a listen, so I'm going to experience it much like I would watching a movie. I'm just going to close out everything else and do it. But yeah.
So
Still, we're worth a
For
listen.
me, off Ada Vista, To Be Hunted is one of my favorite songs of the year, especially after I went to see him live. And first off, holy shit, that was one of the, if not the best shows I've ever been to. It was incredible. Nice. But
I saw the stuff you sent me from it. It was huge.
It was phenomenal. To Be Hunted, The Algorithm, Sweet Thing are the ones that stick out to me off Ada Vista. Now,
that's funny. Those were my least favorites on the album.
Those are my favorites.
Skippers for me in some way. But no, I mean, I didn't skip anything. But I was like, I can't wait to get to the next one.
And Bando really fucking hit me hard. I love that whole album. That album is one of those, like, I know right after I saw him and right before, those two albums were all I listened to. Like, A Place Where Love Goes, the closing track off Bando, is one of my top listened to songs of 2024. It's got a very Daft Punky vocoder type chorus that I'm just a whore for. Like, just cover my face with that shit, daddy type stuff.
Yeah.
So that album I loved, and Childish Gambino, it was one of those things where for the first part of the year I was in such a disenchanted place with music, especially new music. That those felt very refreshing to me. Those were it was the most excited I had felt about music in quite some time, was re-sparked by Childish Gambino.
Agree. I would have to agree with you. There wasn't an album that I can think of in 2023 that was a constant listen like Ada Vista was. Ada Vista was one of the first albums in a long time that was just on constant replay as a new album anyways. Anything in the past year or two before that was just me comfort eating, like I said. But anything else next before we move on to another one?
So you do an album next because
okay. So you want moody or funny?
Both. And please share your work.
Yeah. Show my work. Okay. I'm gonna go with Insurgentes or Insurgents. I'm not sure exactly how that's pronounced. But this was Steven Wilson, and I'm gonna group in Steven Wilson and Porcupine Tree together in this segment here, because the main three albums that I find myself going back to, because there was a period of time in 2022 where I was so emotionally distraught and broken that only Steven Wilson and Porcupine Tree offered me the catharsis and the I was. It may have even fed my mental unwellness to a certain extent, because I had an entire playlist of Steven. It was SW/PT was the name of my playlist. It was every single song, except for the ones I didn't like that I cherry picked out, which I often do with these big, large band playlists. Just ones I know I'm always going to skip. But for the most part, the albums that I would listen to the most out of there were Insurgentes, Deadwing, and Nil Recurring, which is a bonus disc. I think Nil Recurring is the bonus disc for Fear of a Blank Planet. Yes. So which I really enjoyed Fear of a Blank Planet, but the songs on Nil Recurring, especially the song Normal, Normal became my rock song, not rock in like a genre sense, but like the thing I clung to in the storm. That one particular song was a lighthouse for me.
Sentimental.
And sentimental, yes. That very much went in hand with each other. And I remember you coming over to the house before I left it, and I was showing you I was learning how to play it. And it's definitely hands down one of the more complicated songs I've learned to play on guitar. But it was so deeply ingrained in me that I had to learn it. Like I was obsessive over absorbing this song as much as possible in every way that I could. But yeah, normal by Porcupine Tree is just fantastic. But the album that was like a full album that I'll listen to on just repeat, Insurgentes, specifically the songs Harmony Korine, No Twilight in the Court of the Gods, which has a relentless and menacing bass part and one of the most unhinged, improvised, jazzy solos I've ever heard. Like, you know, it to describe, to try to use words to describe how this solo sounds is almost a completely futile effort, but it sounds like the person doesn't know how to play guitar and they're just messing with you, and then it just devolves into this insanity of arpeggios and triplets, and it's a creature that hunts you in the dark and makes you question the very nature of reality. I love that song, No Twilight, so much. And then Significant Other, which is another one that just hits me so deeply every time I hear it. It is a no skipper every single time. But yeah, that whole album, Insurgentes, is just haunting and melancholy and beautiful. And it's so weird how it makes me feel is so unique that if I'm playing it around other people, I almost feel like they're seeing me naked when they hear it, you know? Like it's weird to hear other people experience the music, because I'm like, oh, they're not going to understand it the way that I do and the way that I feel it and how deeply it hits me. It's probably unhealthy, but it is Steven Wilson and Porcupine Tree. It resonates with me so intimately on a musical level that I honestly, if I could just absorb what he does, because none of their stuff is overly complicated. It's just super creative and innovative, and like, you know, of course it's stuff, you know, a lot of his albums, one of the main criticisms people have lobbied at Steven Wilson is oftentimes, you know, he'll produce an album by a band and then his next solo work is very heavily influenced by the band that he just produced an album for. Like In Absentia and Opeth, and Deadwing and Opeth, or you know, the Pink Floyd stuff that he's done. There's different eras he's gone through, and unfortunately, up into a point, like when Guthrie Govan left after I think it was Hand Cannot Erase, a lot of his output became more poppy and electronica, and I really enjoy it. One of the albums I is not on my list here, but it's funny. Have you ever, and I'll kind of pose this to you, have you ever experienced an album and you enjoy it when you first listen to it, but it isn't until like a year or two later that you go back to it and now you get it? Like now you fully understand and can resonate with the album. And it's funny for me because Steven Wilson specifically, a lot of artists that I like and that you like, they'll release an album and it's like the perfect thing you need at that moment. Like it's the thing you needed to hear. It was the soundtrack you needed to have. It was the catharsis you needed to experience. But with Steven Wilson, oftentimes I find he's like a year ahead of me. Or like with most of his releases, it's always with him that I'll go back to one of his albums that I may have given it a listen or two when it first came out, but later on I'll go listen to it and I'm like, oh shit, this is where I'm at right now. He just knew it way before I did. But yeah, have you ever experienced anything like that?
I have, but for whatever reason, I cannot think of one off the top of my head, but very much so. Well, actually, I take that back. Opeth's prog era this year really clicked with me more than it had in the past.
Like the
post watershed stuff. So Heritage on. I found myself listening to
Heritage. Yeah, that's the one I was trying to think of.
I found myself listening to more of that. The moment
Eternal Rains Will Come is one of my favorite songs. It really is.
I've always loved that one, but things like Era off The Sorceress, that is a song that really hit home for me. this year specifically in my sort of Opethy state, which always happens when it's weird with the seasons. If the position of the sun looks different, my listening habits like change, like that.
Sure. Well, Opeth is a very fall winter album, anyways. Like, you know, they know when they're releasing their stuff at the right time.
Which I mean, in November 22nd is when the last Will and Testament came out, which I think that I don't know. I was listening to it today, and I had the urge to for the first time since it came out, and I hit it hard for that week. The last Will and Testament is the most well-rounded Opeth record. It's the growls are back. I mean, I know everybody talks about like, oh, the growls are back, and you can't not talk about it with this album. He's growling again, which I really don't feel either way about. Apparently, he's upset that people are happy that the growls are back, but that's neither here nor there. Yes.
Why'd you put him back in there if you're gonna be mad?
I was watching
for being glad that you.
I was
put
watching
them in
Coffee
there.
with Ola, and he seemed like annoyed by it, and he even went as far to say that he was gonna make a really just absolutely shit record with growls just to see if people liked it. And I'm like, all right, that's kind of a dick move, but.
Triple platinum.
I thought it was a really solid album. It's a concept album that, to be honest, these days I don't have much energy to go and like dip my balls in the concept. I do know based upon that, I have to give them credit for their packaging of the album because I bought the physical copy. And when you take the booklet out, it unfolds as a poster that is a will. All the lyrics are under paragraphs as if it's a last will and testament, which I thought was really cool packaging. So I'll give him credit for that. It was a solid album. I know some people put that at the top of their list. I don't know if I would or not, but you know,
I would give it an honorable mention. I definitely listened to it a bunch when it came out. I think there was a good week, 2 weeks where it was the only thing that I had on. I found myself, and this was what I found something frustrating about that album, and I don't know if it was the band or if I don't know if it was my current headspace when I was listening to it. But there were moments when I was listening to the album where I would get lost. And I was waiting for a part to show up that I really enjoyed or a solo or something. And I remember there was this one day where I would put the song on, wait for the part to come on. My mind would wander halfway through the song, and I would forget that I was listening to it, and I would miss the part completely and have to rewind and go back to it.
It's very busy and dense. And I will say that much.
It is very busy, which is not a bad thing. Technically, it is a wonderfully made album. Very well composed, and I love what they're doing with the different sound things. You know, you got some jazzy
Ian
in there.
Anderson from Jethro Tull was the spoken word, and
was that
also
really
the flutes as well. There's a
I had no
funny,
idea.
Sort of quote about the album where they asked Ian Anderson to come in and narrate. Play a character essentially in the story, and while he was there he goes, do you guys need any flute? And they didn't initially before Ian Anderson asks, and then they were like, well, if Ian Anderson asks, yes, we need flute.
Yas flute. That's great. So yeah, that's a good album. I'm sure I'm gonna go back to it again at some point, or at least I think it's paragraph 4 and paragraph 6. There's the two songs that I really like are the one with the flute solo and then the one with the amazing key. Paragraph 4 with the flute solo, and then I think it's paragraph. What's the last one before the one that has
7.
a title? 7. So 7's the one that has the big ass keyboard solo, like half keyboard, half guitar solo in it. where it gets like really Jordan Rudess-y, and I enjoyed it. I love a good synth solo. I'm a whore for that kind of stuff, as it were. But yeah, good album on there.
And what other albums? Speaking of comedy, because you didn't get to touch on the comedy side of
Oh
things.
yeah. I got the two big ones that kind of stood out to me, that I've kind of been going back to, and I will briefly touch on one of them and then dive into the other one. But Kaiju Funk and Wolves of Glendale. And just saying Kaiju Funk, you're just like, what the fuck is this? It's funk music where the lyrics and themes are all designed around Godzilla and his cadre of monsters, the cadre of kaiju, as it were. And a lot of it that you find on YouTube and on Spotify would appear to be AI generated to a certain extent, or assisted by AI. I don't think the whole thing. I don't think you could make a song that's as well put together with like. I think probably the somebody sang it and then they put the parts together for it, and but the music itself is composed. But yeah, Kaiju Funk. It hit me in a really silly place that I kind of needed to be, and on a more heartfelt note, it kind of helped me connect with my son to a certain extent, my oldest son, because me and him were already kind of sharing a love of Godzilla. That was something we were going to see the movies and watching it together, and Godzilla -1 had come out last year, and that was one of my favorite movies of that year. And I had never, even in my in my kid years, I was much more into Power Rangers and stuff, and the Super Sentai type stuff, but I don't know, in the past couple of years, I kind of went down a kaiju Toho rabbit hole and shared some of that stuff with my son, and he was kind of into it too. And so, when we were riding down one weekend I think we were going down to see Grandpa before he moved into the nursing home. We put the album on. The album, the main album that I'm listening to is Kaiju Funk. If you just search it on Spotify, the album will come up. It's artist and the name of the album. But each song seems to be a different kind of genre of funk, or a different era of funk, because they don't all sound like they come from the same artist. It almost sounds like a compilation album of different funk artists getting together. But yeah, I enjoy it. It's super silly. Some of it was really catchy, and I would find myself getting lyrics and phrases and stuff stuck in my head. I mean, with it being funk music, a lot of it is talking about like pimp this and slap a pimp this, and give it a good backhand, and just really silly, almost like blaxploitation, but with Godzilla characters. And I'm just like, it's such a unique concept that it really stuck with me for a little bit. And yeah, I'll continue to go back to it. There's almost every song on that album ended up on my year-end playlist, because I enjoyed it, and it was safe music to put on my kids. And while we're talking about that, another one that really stuck with me and is still a constant listen even by myself is the song Disco Snails by Wolfman. Did I share Disco Snails with you?
You did not. I was really hoping you were going to mention Werewolves of Glendale.
Wolves of Glendale. Yes. Well, I'm about to touch on that, but in the Disco Snails is
touch it.
Cake. It's cake meets B-52s. It's just spoken word on top of funk music or disco music, and I absolutely love it. Check out Disco Snails. It's my 5-year-old's favorite song in the entire world. Wolves of Glendale. Okay. So this was an album and an artist that was recommended to me by one of my karaoke patrons. It's another guy. He's another musician. We have very similar sensibilities and humor and music taste and things. And he mentioned them to me, and I was like, I'd never heard of them. And he was like shocked. His reaction to me when I said I hadn't heard them was like, dude, you're going to love them. And so on the way home from that karaoke gig that night, I listened to the entire album. And by the time I had gotten home, I had already texted the album to all my friends and was like, this is incredible. It's one of the best things I've ever listened to. And I still maintain that album is just, they are going to struggle to put a sophomore effort that is as good as this first album was. And for those who don't know, Wolves of Glendale is a trio of comedians and musicians out of Glendale, California. One plays guitar, one plays keys, and the other plays a Roland drum pad. And they all stand in a line. They were discovered by Tenacious D, brought on, and I think the guy who produced Tenacious D's first album produced their album, their debut album, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. But they opened for Tenacious D on a couple of their tours, and me and Aaron actually just went and saw them in concert a few weeks ago. And it was one of the funniest, most fun experiences I've had at a live show in a very long time. Very intimate. It was a small venue, like probably 100, less than 200 people in this place watching this funny band play. But not only is the songwriting great, and you have songs like "Vapin' in Vegas" or "The Gym" or "Loud Ass Car," "Everyone's an Expert." Each song is hilariously and brilliantly written, and then the music they pair with these lyrics is so good. It's got a yacht rock feel to it, and I hate using that phrase. I know Rick Beato just released a video talking about how much he hates the phrase yacht rock, but it is very much in the vein of like Hall & Oates and Toto, and there's not every song is in the same genre style, but songs like Olivia, which is very much sounds like a Hall & Oates type with the harmonies and everything, and they all sing together. Me and Aaron learned to cover The Gym, and we're playing that at our shows, and that's a lot of fun because we're singing the harmonies on it together, and it's such a well-made album, very well produced, and I think it's for everyone. Or maybe it's not for everyone, but I think everyone should listen to it because you'll be a better person if you do. What are your thoughts on
arguably, musically speaking, the best comedy rock album? The music aspect of it is so, and I don't mind the term yacht rock. I fucking, whatever you want to call it, I love that style. I spent
sure.
Yes.
Steely Dan.
A great deal of my time this year was spent listening to Toto, specifically Absolutely Live. The version of Hold the Line off of that's like 10 minutes with the female singer, just it gets me wet. But I love that style of music that they chose to pair with these ridiculous lyrics. I love the ridiculous lyrics. Olivia was one of my favorites. Vapin' in Vegas, obviously. I will say my only gripe with the album is it's a little front-loaded, which meaning all the really good stuff. I think so? It's front-loaded.
Okay. Okay, yeah. I can see that their more popular hits are definitely at the front of the album, but I love Planetarium Dump, Everyone's an Expert, Shrimp, I don't know. Those maybe aren't as complex as the other ones are, but I love them.
But I love the album. It's for whatever reason, and maybe it's my process of cynicism. Comedy rock just kind of rubs me the wrong way whenever a band is trying to be outwardly funny. It mildly annoys me now. But I loved that album.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great it's one of the best first albums from a band I can remember in a very long time. Like, just out of the gate, they put out just a monster. And I can't wait to see where they go with it. I think there's a couple of new songs that they played at the concert. And one of them, I'll just to give you a brief synopsis of the plot for it. It's called Definitely Jeff. And it's about how a guy wants to quit his job, but instead of quitting his job, he's going to fake his own death. And in the process of faking his own death, he's also going to kill his neighbor Jeff and assume his identity. And so he's just his next door neighbor Jeff now, and the main character is supposedly dead, but it's him trying to pass himself off as his neighbor Jeff, and he's definitely Jeff. That's who he is. And it's it's so fucking stupid. One thing to mention about their live show, and I hope and pray that they release a live DVD or a video or some recording of their album. Or of their live show that they've done on this tour. The Scorpion Train Tour is what it was called. Throughout the whole concert, each one of the members tries to explain what Scorpion Train means, and none of them know what it means, and they can't explain it, and it's, they just keep passing it off to the other person, and they each get their own moment throughout the set to freeze time and, like, talk to themselves and have, like, their inner dialogue inside their mind, which is all pre-recorded stuff. And so towards the end of the show, they all decide that they're going to stop. They're going to stop being a band, and they're all going to quit the band, and they're all going to do their own things that they want to do until a big booming sound comes in, and the sound of the roof being torn off comes over the speakers, and they all look up into the sky, and they go, "Optimus Prime!" And the voice of Optimus Prime booms in, and the music... It's not exactly, for copyright purposes, that's not the exact music that they play in the Transformers movie when Optimus Prime has his speech, but it's pretty damn close to the music that plays when Optimus Prime has his speech in the movie. And they're like, "You are the best comedy band ever. We need you to rock together to save the world, Wolves of Glendale." And so Optimus Prime convinces them that they all need to stay a band together, and then they rock out the rest of the show. And I thought it was one of the funniest. Like, they had so many sound effects that were played that they just produced stuff for the live show. And there was lots of skits and audience interaction, and yeah, super fun experience. But yeah, Wolves of Glendale, definitely a top tier band in my book.
All right. And so I went the opposite direction, very much so, with my sort of taste, especially. You showed me Wolves of Glendale a little bit before I discovered this next band that I'm about to talk about. Chatpile. Chatpile released Cool World this year. They're out of Kansas City, Kansas, and it's very dark 90s industrial, but not in like the Trent Reznor type way, but more of like the Grotus, Godflesh type things that influenced City by Strapping Young Lad is very much what Cool World by Chatpile sounds like. And their whole aesthetic is working class horror, and it's about the horrors of like factory work. Like, I know a song on their first album, Slaughterhouse, was about an actual event that occurred in Kansas City, Kansas, where one of the workers lost their fucking minds and decapitated another worker. Yeah, so God. It's like there's songs like that. Why off the first album is about homeless people. There's another song about like school shootings. It's all very sort of darker material, but the last song on their first album was called Grimace Smoking Weed.jpg, which I think is one of the greatest song names. So there are like elements of slight tongue-in-cheek humor there. But their new album, I remember when the video for the opening track, I Am Dog Now, when that came out, it very much felt like a certain breed of like found footage horror. It had that sort of aesthetic and also sound tonally to it. And then Mask came out, and that song, and it's spelled M-A-S-C. And the video for it is so David Lynch. I love the video. Tonally speaking, it's more of a post-rock Cure type thing.
Okay.
Their style is just industrial. His vocals are so manic, and I love that in a vocalist so much, which will lead me to one of my other favorites that I just discovered like last week of this year, but I've listened to it so fucking much that it's up there. Um, they're a great band, and they're on a label called the Flenser, and they have a ton of great sort of underground, very dark black metal, alternative metal, not your usual gent type stuff. Bands like Full of Hell, who also released a new album this year. I think Blood Incarnation, which is another album that I have to talk about because it's like death metal meets Pink Floyd meets Cosmos era Evangeles, the composer who did the music for the original 80s run of Cosmos. As a matter of fact, I didn't know this until I was researching this with Blood Incarnation. One of the guys from Tangerine Dream, who was a big synthwave band from the 80s, did some guest work on this album. And it's very just it'll switch from like your typical blast beat guttural vocals to like it cuts and then it's just synths and very wish you were here air guitar tones with the like the shine on you crazy diamond chords, that type effect to it. And it gives like a perfect break to that sort of ear fatiguing heaviness, because there's a reason those albums are so short, these death metal albums. But it gives you those nice departures. And it's called Absolute Elsewhere, which is also the name of a 70s prog rock band. They named their album after that band. So it's all just like kind of a cool thing. And I find myself getting much more into the grittier production style, performance style this year. And Chat Pile, I know, like, there's just moments on that. Like, there's a 1-2 punch in Cold World by Chat Pal. The first one is Tape and then Camcorder. And those two songs together just make you feel like you're watching something that you shouldn't. And I thought that I thought I was fucked up for thinking that until I watched there's a podcast called Every Album Ever, where they take and they'll listen to an entire band's discography and report on it. They love the album so much that they did just a review of it. And they said that a lot of that album, especially those two songs, make you feel like you're watching a snuff film. And I fucking love it. I love it. That's one of those albums that I think through and through, the pacing of it, it kind of gives you a break with songs like Masks and certain parts of Shame and The Milk of Human Kindness kind of give you a break from that crushing brutality of it at times. But that album blew the fuck up too. That was one of those that I remember when God's Country came out, I heard it, I loved it, I thought it was very unique. And then when this album came out, it's like every fucking body was talking about Chat Pal. So good for them, man. It's, they got to finally quit their day jobs, and this is what they do for a living now, is Chat Pile. So I'm happy to see that. And it was cool to have the experience of looking at a record label like you used to, like back when I know Metal Blade used to do samplers and things like that. With the modern state of music today and everything being independently released, you don't get a whole lot of that. You really don't. It's like that's one of those aspects that's kind of lost. And, when I went to buy some merch from them, I started checking out all these other bands. So that was a really cool one. And it is on to you next for your album of discussion?
Yeah, I only really have two more on here that are at different points in the year. The one that I kind of clung to for a little while, and it kind of sent me down a little bit of a genre rabbit hole, but I was packing up my dad's apartment because we had to move him into a nursing facility. And going through his CDs, I was packing up, and I came across a CD that I absolutely loved from a soundtrack that I absolutely loved, and that's "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" The soundtrack for that movie is just wonderful bluegrass, old school, and some of it was recorded like around the time of the movie. Some of it was covers, and some of it was old recordings. But that whole soundtrack just puts you into this mindset of a time when things were a lot more simple, and I don't know, I have a very special place in my heart for bluegrass type music, and that old school country style, and it connects back to the type of music my dad used to listen to, and he was into a lot of old school and gospel, and I don't know. It stuck with me after I listened to it a couple of times while packing up, and took it with me, and it was on repeat for several weeks afterwards. And there's several songs on that album that I'll go back to. Big Rock Candy Mountain, Hard Time Killing Floor Blues. Man of Constant Sorrow obviously is the big one off of there that everybody knows. But yeah, that is a high recommend. And then the other one that I've kind of been on lately, and this is an album that rears its head every couple of years, and I think is just top to bottom a goddamn masterpiece, and that's Fortress by Alter Bridge. I don't know if you're familiar with this album. It came out in 2012, 2013, something like that. And at the time I discovered that album, then it really resonated with me with what I was going through. And a lot of the things I was going through back then are also happening in new and even worse ways than they were then. And the album has come back into my life, and it is just... I have not, and this is, I'm getting a little personal on this, but music for me is extremely personal, so it's hard to separate those, but I have not sat and cried while listening to an album in my car while parked somewhere in a very long time. And that was the album that just got me, and just it took me. I described it to Aaron because Aaron's a huge Tremonti and Alter Bridge fan himself, and it's a top 5 album for him as well, of like all time. But that album to me is just pure catharsis, from the way the riffs are played, to the choices made with the vocals and the harmony, the lyrical content of it all. There's very much the lyrics have a theme of like struggling with one's own faith, with relationships falling apart, hope beyond the sadness, things that are all a lot of themes that I write about in the music as well, that I make whenever I do make it. And so it to me is one of those that, like, on every single level, every part of it just hits me and rings so true to me. And so over the past week or two, specifically, that album has come back up, and that has been like almost a daily listen for me, is going through that whole album. But yeah, if you haven't heard Fortress before, I highly recommend it. It's the best album they've made. Every album since then, the production quality is not as good, and it sounds flattened and overproduced and muted, and it doesn't hit me in the same way. I've tried listening to other albums by this band, but it's one of those that it's like they're not even one of my top favorite bands of all time. Like, they're a fantastic band, don't get me wrong, but that one particular album at this specific time in my life hit me harder than any of the albums that have come out lately from some of my top favorite artists of all time. It's just right time, right place, right ears. And yeah, Fortress.
Which,
that's where I'm
speaking
at.
of favorite artists, by the way, I know we reviewed Power Nerd. How's that holding up for you, personally?
It's good. I mean, it's in my Spotify top 100. The whole album is on there because that was one that I listened to over and over again throughout its release. Knuckle Dragger, still really enjoying. I think that and Ruby Quaker and Power Nerd are the only ones that really have kind of stuck with me through the rest of the album. I mean, they're, the other ones come on and stuff, but I'm not there anymore now. Musically
Kind of
and
concur.
emotionally.
I hit that one really hard for a while, but I don't know how much longevity that's going to have, to be honest.
Sure.
But it is a very specific flavor that I don't know if I'm going to be in the right mood for all the time. I know for me, sorry, go ahead.
Well, just one additional thing to add on to that. Like, anytime I get into a Devin kick, like, another thing that I've been going to a lot lately are all of his demo albums. I sometimes I'll go through a kick and I'll just listen to, like, I'll start with Epiclouder or Contain Us, and I'll listen through all of Contain Us and then Epiclouder and then Test of Manhood, and I'll go down the line. I for some reason I go on a kick where I only want to hear the demo stuff, and also the bonus tracks that you sent me probably sent me on that as well.
His bonus discs are often as good, if not better, than the actual album. I'll give him full credit for that. Especially, I noticed that with like Epicloud was one that I really noticed that on. Yeah. But that one,
what were you saying?
I think as it stands right now, for this year, an album that I didn't know existed because I didn't know this band existed, and I didn't know this band was two other bands kind of put together existed. Better Lovers is an album that I opened up Tidal one morning. I saw the album artwork, which is like a Mad Magazine style cartoon drawing of a guy blowing his face off with fireworks.
I see
very
it.
colorful.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now.
And like it's macabre, but it's done in a very way that's almost like pretty. Like if you're not paying attention, you're gonna think that's a bouquet of flowers. And it caught my eye, and I was like, all right, I have to know what this is. Like, it made me feel like I was in a record store or, buying CDs on my parents' credit card with Columbia House. As we all did. I'm sure
I did it, man. My dad had the same thing. That's how I got my first Dream Theater albums was through Columbia House.
There's a reason they went out of business, because nobody fucking paid Columbia House. Because everybody.
Oh, you were supposed to pay for that? You were supposed to. I thought it was just 10 CDs for a penny.
No, they get you in with the subscription, bro. But I started the album, and the moment the vocals kicked in, I knew who the fuck was singing. It's a singer who I don't listen to as much for how much I fucking love his vocals. It's Greg from Dillinger Escape Plan.
Oh,
I
immediately
recognized his voice, and I was like, I'm fucking in. And I had to look it up because I was like, that's Greg, from Dillinger Escape Plan. And it's everybody except the drummer from Every Time I Die. And it's the drummer for Fit for an Autopsy and Greg from Dillinger Escape Plan, who I didn't know is singing for Jerry Cantrell now live. Like, he goes on tour with Jerry Cantrell and does the harmonies. But that album, just I listen to it every day, every fucking day. I mean, the intro is so fucking heavy. It's one of those that, like, it starts off with like the fake out sort of clean guitar sound, and it just gets brutally heavy, and it's I have a thing for mania in music in general. It's just something that I like. Uh,
Like
yes, I like
unhingedness.
that, just fucking going
Yeah.
crazy, especially in vocals. Like I want to hear them not taking their
Yeah.
medication. That's just what it's what makes me happy. Uh,
See, that's how I feel about that solo at the beginning of No Twilight on Insurgentes. It's just mania in guitar
a
form.
white horse covered in blood is fucking great. I love that. There's a part at the end where it's like a repeated line and the vocal performance sort of gets more intense as it goes on, and it's just it's going to be hard to handle when you melt down, and it's just getting more intense every time. The guitar work on this album is very surprising for this style of music. Like the solos are very well thought out and well performed, and it's got great pacing of like sort of hooky stuff, heavy stuff. This album just like caught me off guard like a week ago, and it's already on my
Okay.
top. And they have a couple of EPs out as well. Their story was kind of funny. It's like Every Time I Die dissolved, and like they decided they had to keep going, and the drummer is a professional wrestler now and his career is taken off, so he said, hey guys, I'm gonna go be a wrestler instead of playing drums. So they were being produced by the drummer of Fit for an Autopsy, who said, I'll do it. So they got him, and they were like partying in Vegas, like drunk as shit, and they ran into Greg at a Jerry Cantrell show, and they said, maybe you'll want to do this. And like 5 months later, he sent a text saying like, let's give these motherfuckers what they want. And they just became a band. And I watched the Downbeat podcast with them earlier today, actually. And something that I don't really get the vibe from in music and musicians these days is that feeling of bands and brotherhood within. It just doesn't, I don't get a lot of that chemistry. And most of these people, having played in a band with one another for 20 years, they have that, and it shows in the music. And even though you have two new members, it feels very natural. But then I will say about Greg is he blends well with others. I know Killer Be Killed is a super group that's like Troy from Mastodon,
Yeah, I'm familiar with
Max
them.
Cavalera, and him. I love those. I went on like a huge fucking Dillinger Escape Plan, Killer Be Killed, just everything involving Greg. His synthwave stuff is great. Yes, he makes like kind of synthwave type stuff as well. I'll have to send you Ice to Never, because that is a song that I think is just fucking brilliant. But that is an album that might take my pick for album of the year. I found myself very much going more in that direction of raw sort of style than like didn't Tesseract release a new album this year? I
don't even
think
know.
The War
I
of
didn't even
Being
hear
came
that.
out, and it's just it's not my thing anymore. It's to me, gent and the sort of proggy metal served a purpose and a time in my life, but at this point, I've kind of just I'm not the same as I was back then. Nobody is, and my listening habits have sort of reflected that.
Sure. I know. I feel that completely. I'm looking through like things I listened to in the past year that weren't even repeats for me. Like honorable mentions and things. Mea Culpa by Gojira. I went through that. I did go through a phase where I listened to Magma for a whole week at your recommendation.
The
I really
Art of
enjoyed
Dying
that.
off of The Way of All Flesh actually made it into one of my top listens this year too. That song is to make it sort of personal. I know when my mother died, that is a song that I'll listen to so much. It is so fucking powerful.
Yeah, yeah. The Toe Hider was another one I went into when I realized he was releasing an EP every month for the past 12 months. I went through a whole month where I was listening to all of that stuff, and I mean, we could do a whole podcast on those EPs themselves, but fantastic different genres of music that he's doing. Space Famous probably being my favorite out of all of those songs. Yeah. Good stuff.
So, I would like to ask you this question because I know the last time we attempted to podcast together years ago, and we did a sort of a more dedicated list of our top 10 albums of that year. A lot of which I think I know I still listen to. Like I know Prequel by Ghost came out this year, which honorable mention right here, right now is a fantastic live album. I wish they would use the female vocals on the album more than just Tobias layered. I'll say that much. And that live film was just, if you've not seen that, it's available on streaming now. I think you could buy it on Amazon. The cinematography directing of that is perfect. I love it.
Yeah, I remember you telling me you went and saw it like twice or
I saw
several
it
times,
in
right?
Theaters. I almost went to see it again. It was that good.
Oh,
but,
okay.
Like it was, I thought it was brilliant. But that came out the year that we reviewed. I still listed that. Carpenter Brut. So a couple of those that I mentioned, I can't remember what else it was, have stood the test of time. But I believe I asked, or I kind of ranted, semi-cynically about the sort of future of music and where do you think it's going to go. I would like to present that question to you now before we part ways.
Yeah, man, you were so on the money the last time we did this, because I remember you saying something about like 80s music making a big comeback now, and so we're going to start seeing a lot more, as we get into the next decade, 90s music making a big comeback in the styles that we see. Where do I see it going? Oh, man. I don't feel like I have my finger on the sphere enough to know that. I will say some of the stuff that I have found the most interesting that is also getting some of the most mainstream appeal is the genre crossover stuff. So, like American Motorsports, with the mixing of the country, pop, metal, type sound that people seem to really have clung to. So I would say maybe in the next year or a couple of years, we're going to start seeing more of this mainstream accessible, like not just metal, but crossover styles, where it's jazz influenced. I mean, we see it with popular artists even now, like The Weeknd putting out, basically a synthwave album, or a lot of the past albums he's done are very synth focused. I can see that breaking out even more. I definitely don't see the synthwave influenced stuff slowing down anytime soon. Like, I was listening to the Midnight before a lot of this stuff started becoming so popular, but you have bands like, what is it, the 1975, that are very popular. I think they're even more popular than the Midnight at this point, but the Midnight also has blown the fuck up in the past couple of years. And to think that the lead singer is from Carrollton, just every time it just blows my mind. Tyler Lyle, his voice is the soundtrack of my sadness, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But yeah, I see more of the synthy stuff happening, and I would say more of a blending of the lines of genre. I think that because of the advent of the internet and online streaming platforms and stuff, we are definitely seeing more of a breakdown in the walls of genre and how it used to be run, where it was radio stations back then, so you didn't have a lot of options. So the DJs would try to pair as many of the similar options together as possible, and people would just kind of stick into these, they would have their station that was on in the car, and so they were listening to classic rock, or at the time, rock hits or top 40 or whatever, soft AC, whatever they would call it. And I see, as we get even more into it, we're going to see the breaking down of this early radio structure of music genreing, and it's really just going to be about what people enjoy, and that's exciting to me. I think we're definitely going to see more overproduced stuff, and not in this raw way. But I can always count on you to keep an eye on the underground and finding the good stuff that I would have never heard of if you hadn't seen an album cover in a record shop somewhere. I see. You've seen High Fade, right? Yeah, those guys are like when you mentioned like the brethren of musicians playing together and like feeling it, that's immediately what I thought of was that trio, and their super tight funk playing. Sure, sure. Sound less disdainful when saying TikTok. TikTok. Don't worry, it's going away next year, so that's right. Yeah, yeah. Oh, Midwest emo is also making a huge comeback lately. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep. Okay. Sure. 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 It's not knocked loose. There was all kinds of controversy because they played on Jimmy Kimmel recently. I think their guitar player came into Guitar Center a couple weeks back, buying some gear or something. I don't know. I was like, he was like, everybody was talking to him like he was somebody. I was like, oh, what band are you in? He's like, I'm in Knocked Loose. I was like, oh, cool. I think I've heard of them. Right. Yeah. Sure. I agree. I will take that personally as well, sir. I think I found myself probably on the more cynical side of the spectrum this year, and I know, dude. And maybe it's just where I'm at right now, and I'm in a weird musical place, and my relationship with music, much like all of the relationships in my life, are awkward and strained. So we'll see what the next year brings for us individually, musically. I originally had a goal to have original music out by the end of the year. That did not happen. But I'm still remaining hopeful myself and optimistic, and spring's just around the corner, so we'll see what happens. Yes, sir. Thanks for having me anytime. All right. Peace.